Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you're at. I guess it's still morning most places, though, right? Hey, thanks for joining our webinar today. We're going to be talking about some differences in between 5G and 4G LTE and data plans that go along with it and kind of what you need. And basically how you're going to choose the right data plan. Is it a 5G plan that you're looking for? Is it a 4G LTE plan that you're looking for? While everything that we are focusing on now seems to be 5G, and that's the big buzzword, not everything needs 5G. You don't need the speeds or latency, things like that of a 5G. So we'll get into it, Dave, myself, and talk about which one's going to be the right one for you. Myself, I guess we should do some introductions first, David. That'd probably be a good thing too for those who don't know us. I'm Jackie Sluter, regional sales manager for the eastern part of the country for RCN Technologies. 25 years in wireless, and going on my 10th year in IoT and IoT related solutions. Been selling Cradlepoint for almost that long as well. So, then David.
So you've been doing that longer than I have. So David Earp, I'm a senior sales engineer for Cradlepoint, servicing our nationals in the East. I've been with Cradlepoint for going on 4 years, but I've been selling or working with Cradlepoint and cellular technologies for about 8 or 9 at this point. So you got a little
Still
leg
know
up
about
on
a quarter
me
of what you do.
It's
easier to sell than to fix it.
I appreciate that.
Thanks for joining us today, David. David's even before I got to RCN, I'd worked with David before, so he's a longtime partner of mine and somebody I really trust, and I'm glad he's on this call with us today. So just, how do we work with the wireless carriers? And then when I say we, I'm talking about, RCN as a company and a partner of Cradlepoint, and then Cradlepoint themselves as a manufacturer. We work with all the major North American wireless carriers. So whoever you're using in North America, we are currently probably working a deal with them now, and definitely have worked a deal with them prior. So when it comes to anything like, picking the right device, picking the right network, even down to our provisioning team, working with your wireless carrier to make sure everything gets activated, gets put on your account. And if you want us to set up your Wi-Fi SSID name, admin, passwords, those kind of things, even run through NetCloud for you, or make sure that your new device is on the correct NetCloud account. Those are some reasons, to work with us and some things we do with our partners at Cradlepoint. We connect you to the right carrier. So sometimes you may have, your primary may be wireless carrier A, but you're a nationwide company and A doesn't work everywhere. So we can help you with a secondary connection too in some of those cases. And then we'll help you compare, some of your 5G and 4G networks. So if you're, again, in some NFL areas is what they first launched it, your big cities, they were the first to get 5G. And then some of your secondary areas just didn't have 5G available, but 4G was still strong in those areas. Later on this webinar, we'll talk about some of the devices that are 5G ready, but we'll work on a 4G platform until 5G is there. And then there's nothing you really have to do. It just automatically switches over and looks for that 5G.
Yeah, and like RCN, the Cradlepoint devices that we have in our portfolio, they work on most, if not, I hesitate to say all, major carriers, or all carriers. I hesitate to say. We do work with all major carriers, but the breadth of our portfolio goes very, very wide globally. So most, if not all, of our devices will work for you pretty much.
I'm a huge Ryan Reynolds fan, but I do not think we're going to work on Mint Mobile, David, right?
I haven't tested it. I don't know. They don't have any enterprise data plans, so that would be a little bit tough to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely.
The pricing would be great.
I guess now we both have some homework to figure this out. Maybe Ryan will be on our next call.
Right.
So let's get into 5G versus LTE. LTE is not going away. First of all, I want to make sure we talk about that. It's not like the 3G sunset that we saw where 4G was taking over and then 5G just came in quickly. LTE is going to be around for a long time. And some of the reasons that we look at 5G versus LTE is, it can support up to 10,000 devices per cell site. So kind of think of it like an HOV lane that's opened up. I mean, it's a huge highway, but you also have a speeding fast lane that's not going to be clogged up with a bunch of traffic. That's kind of what a 5G is. And then LTE, I mean, can't hold quite as many devices, but you think on a single cell wave, 1,000 devices, a lot of devices out there, but you can see some congestion out there. That's probably if you've gone to a concert recently and saw people taking pictures of their hot dog or something like that and put it on Instagram or whatever it is, Facebook, and you've seen some pictures taking some while to go down there. You're probably not on a 5G network. You're probably on LTE. Gets the job done, but can't get your picture of your hot dog out there to the internet world as fast. Anything you want to add about the differences in the 5G and in LTE?
Yeah, I mean the capacity means a couple of different things, right? So I mean you're hitting on the cell site. So when you've got a 5G cell tower, yeah, it can support a lot more devices just because of the network slicing, prioritization, and all of that it has, right? But they're a bit more distributed. They can be widespread, but capacity can also mean how far the signal will carry, right? So some of these towers will be spread much further apart than your conventional LTE towers. Now, you won't notice a difference. I can't look at a tower and tell you that's a 5G tower, that's a 4G tower. It doesn't really work that way. But just know that the service is there most places. And even if the 5G service might not be on a tower that you're at, most of the carriers have actually upgraded the cores at those towers. So rather than having them at their data center, they brought them to the edge. So that they can process the data more real time and much quicker. So even if you are looking at the differentiation between 4G and 5G, like we're talking about today, LTE latency has improved actually, and this is kind of leading into the next slide. But LTE latency has actually improved from what it was previously, but nowhere near.
I don't think we went over this in the slide, and shame on us for not doing it, but LTE does have different categories of modems that's available. I mean, there was a Cat 1, there was Cat 3, which we saw. It was kind of like when dial-up was around and you were able to download a song in 4 or 5 minutes. You're like, man, this is the greatest thing ever. Then you got DSL and cable and those kind of things. You saw how much faster it is. So and what really drives that is the customer. I think what I've seen over my 25 years is that customers want it faster and faster and faster, meaning that the networks have to get faster and faster and faster, and the manufacturers such as Cradlepoint has to keep up with that as well. So there's a need for everything. Everybody wants it faster and they want it bigger and better. So that's where we see different categories of modems that are out there. Again, kind of difference between 5G and LTE. There's some cases you may not need a Cat 20 device. It's going to do gigabit speeds. You may need something that's going to be a Cat 4 device. It's a quick failover for credit card machines or something like that. So just keep in mind there are different LTE modems or categories of modems.
And since we're on the topic real quick, I'll get on latency in a second, but since we're on the topic about the different category of modems, right now we don't really have that in the 5G world, right? There's the 5G modems that are out there for pretty much all manufacturers are almost identical. It just depends on how the product is built, the drivers that are developed for it, the software, and then the analytics that you can get from those modems. Unlike the LTE that you were talking at, has different tiers of modems available based on your needs. So you have your IoT modems, your category 1 low speed. You have your mid tier for LTE with usually category 6, category 7, somewhere around there, and then your category 18 for that gigabit. But since we're talking about latency, I'd already mentioned this, that latency has already dropped a lot for LTE. Previous to 5G, the average latency was 100, 200, 300 milliseconds is what you could experience regular time. We're starting to see a lot more sub 100 milliseconds, but still pretty high, in that 80, 90 range with LTE. But that comes from, as I'd mentioned before, moving that from the actual data centers and bringing that closer to the towers so it can process and get on the line a lot quicker. Versus the 5G. 5G, we're talking sub 10 milliseconds, when you're talking about the ultra low latency, millimeter wave, speed and throughput. So latency is going to be one of the big factors when you have that. If you have mission critical applications or something that's really time sensitive, latent wise, 5G might be the right solution for you because it'll get that on the wire that much quicker from edge device all the way to that edge.
And another part about the latency too, I guess, just to talk about why it's so important is I look through the list of attendees and I don't see my kids on here or the guy that just beats me down when we play online games. So, latency, the importance of that is just, if you have cameras, those kind of things too, just be able to get that speed out there which you're supposed to get. And I mean, it could be the difference between, somebody that's trading, stocks or something like that. That latency, that quickness could be, did you miss a stock? Did you miss buying it at a certain amount? Did you miss selling it a certain amount? Video games, again, obviously being a big thing too. Are you you're going to glitch or buffer a little bit quickly, and your game's done? Those kind of things. So it's in a real world situation. I mean, latency is super important, I believe.
Yeah, and that's when we talk about that near real time, right? I mean, you're not going to get the instantaneous real time everything, but near real time, sub 10 milliseconds, you're not going to perceive that difference, right? It's going to seem like it's almost exactly real right as that second happens. But the latency really comes into play with, like I said, a lot of business critical or just time sensitive things like the
Yeah,
stocks
see,
or the
as
gaming
as
that you were
everything gets
mentioning.
faster and faster, we're going to end up in a few years just like we were when dial-up went away. We're going to say, how do we ever live with 1 millisecond of latency? How do we do that?
Right.
Right, right.
You get to the
And then security is a
nanoseconds,
big
right?
part of it too. 5G has some newer security controls. A lot of the security that we talk about too is going to be within NetCloud Manager on Cradlepoint devices. Hopefully, everybody on here has either owns or uses a Cradlepoint device. If not, we can definitely get you some demos, some high level, low level demos of NetCloud Manager, which is a great tool. It's Cradlepoint's cloud-based management software. You can look at one device, you can look at all your devices at one pane of glass, but it has a lot of security that's available in it too. So things like network splicing, it's overlaying several virtual networks on top of a shared network. Some of the things with LTE, they still have some security that's there. It'll protect the device, user data, but as anything else, as you see more iterations of things come, you're going to see 5G is going to offer a lot more in security, latency, capacity, those kinds that we talked about. Does everyone need it? Still want to go back to this too. Not everyone's going to need 5G, and that's what this whole webinar is about. Is we do want to get you future proofed. If it's something for me, especially if I knew that I was going to have a project that's going to be out there, for the next 5-10 years, and I don't want to buy another piece of equipment, I might want to look at that 5G device and go ahead and upgrade to it too, and get you future proof. But if you're somebody who says, I need to switch out equipment every couple of years, we're real rough on it. Again, if security features, some of the features of 5G could be something you're looking into, but LTE may be something that still fits your wagon.
Yeah, yeah. So, and with that security, you mentioned the network slicing. So, network slicing is kind of a big thing, especially for the carriers. They're able to put more, we'll call them private networks. I don't mean private as in it's a full private network, but they're able to put customers in their own slice within that those channels, so that the packets can't be sniffed, all that stuff, right? Something that LTE really doesn't have unless you actually build out a full private network with the carriers, or a full private network of your own. Is the only way you can really guarantee that. So the network slicing is one big thing that's really coming to the 5G, and then there's other things within the protocols and the standards for the communications with the tower and the devices, and out to the internet, that just help with that security a little bit more. But to Jackie's point, even though it has some more advanced security, we'll call it, and newer security with it, the conventional cellular security that we have, the encryption with the towers and stuff, it suffices in most use cases today. So it's something to think about on how, if you want those specific communications to be specifically secure, or if you're comfortable with the level that we have today, and we'll layer on some of the security services that Jackie had mentioned with the Cradlepoint products.
And just a rule of thumb, make sure you change your passwords. There was a manufacturer out there, not
Yes,
Cradlepoint, many
definitely.
years ago, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was their default, and it got out there, and a lot of people didn't change their default. So just a lot of people were just wasn't a lot of it wasn't malicious. They were just wanting to run up data, usage, and I had many a carrier call me asking what in the world happened when they're getting $50,000 and $60,000 in overages for their customers. So just go back to the basics and change your passwords. Some of the use cases here.
Right.
So talk about some of the 5G use cases we've had. In Sydney, we had and there also is if you click the download button, you have the ability to download this case study. But a ferry company in Sydney. They were using 4G LTE. It was going okay, but they're trying to run some closed caption television, some security cameras, and just 4G LTE wasn't cutting it on there. Got them to try some of the 5G. They were trialing some of it out and said, hey, we do see a big difference in the streaming, that they're able to run high diff cameras on it. And they ended up making a full 5G switch on all their vessels. And again, they were still users of NetCloud Manager. They were able to seamlessly move that over through NetCloud. But on these, on these ferries, they were able to use a ruggedized Cradlepoint 5G device, being the R1900. And the benefits were, having the streaming video was a lot clearer. So, I mean, there's no sense in buying a super high def camera when you can't really run it and it just looks like a potato, really. It's you want to have something to be able to a network that's going to support it, and devices are going to support that 5G network and be able to run those cameras.
Yeah, and the high def's definitely, one of those critical things, especially on a boat system like the ferries that they have in Australia there. They'll want to view things real time on certain times, right? So if there's an incident happening, they're not going to want to wait for that feed to download, or to upload from the boat and then download it later to see that high quality. They're going to be able to want to view it, real time. So that's really where that 5G service comes into play, and making the move for them was definitely instrumental.
We're seeing, the best service real in the world we live in right now. We're seeing a lot of public safety using 5G. They're switching for this thing camera option, be able to really get granular and look at things that are live. Officer involved shooting. Immediately, an officer goes in their trunk and pops the shotgun rack. They're able to look in and see high def. School buses. I mean, I hate to even bring that up, but school buses are something that you need high def too. So they're looking to see, not just for the speed of it, but for the aspect of being able to have that clear picture on security cameras. And election boards. I mean, who doesn't love elections, right? So we have a couple of board of elections that we're working with, lots of them actually, that are now switching to LTE, they're doing LTE and 5G. Some of us, we have what's called a P&K kit, a pop-up network kit, and they're using a lot of these to have a separate segregated network from anything else that they're using. We've been told that elections can be stolen or whatever we've heard in this case. But when you have a true dedicated network to the elections and to the polling systems that are not tied in any other way, it's kind of hard to say that something's been stolen or there's been some interference. But we did have some that, just they were using MiFis, which are the small jet packs from some of the carriers, and saying, hey, these are not supporting it. We don't feel that the security's there. We feel like, some of the packets of data were being lost. So they switched over to Cradlepoint using their NetCloud. We were able to do some configurations, even up to right before they opened the polls. We had to make some adjustments on some of the configurations. We're able to do that in real time and not be there to touch the device at the election polls. And so, again, we also were able to use multiple carriers on these things too. So if you have a site that goes down, last thing you want is day of elections and find out your election, or if you're the carrier and you had a site go down or something, and you couldn't get your polling stations open, or you couldn't get the polls to close because you didn't have your data sent back in. You have the ability with Cradlepoint to use a secondary carrier in that to kind of back you up. Nobody needs to know that's what happened if it did happen, but you have that ability to have that redundancy carrier too.
Yeah, it's one of those perception things, whereas if you don't notice it happened, did anything really change, right? And jumping over those multiple carriers, it's instrumental, to have that failover, have that backup capability. And then back to your MiFi, not sufficient security for sure. They're consumer off-the-shelf products that you can buy and, you just travel around with it, stick it in your car, whatever, to give yourself a quick hotspot, similar to your cell phone. But just like the cell phone, the MiFis, they're small. They can be lost. They can be taken. They can be, whatever. So, having something that can be like the P&K that's can be stuck in a corner somewhere, or, if you need to, bolt it down so it can't walk anywhere, attach it to one of the polling booths, so it has to go with that product wherever it is. Just that helps in the physical layer of that security. But then everything else with the NetCloud service and all of our security services, as well as, the cellular separate network from your traditional Wi-Fi. To have that little bit of extra security for that. Definitely great for the poles.
And then trying to see this move here. So energy study, we do a lot of, and Cradlepoint actually, which is they're becoming a big player in this. The beginning didn't have a real big play on SCADA. Some of the utilities, some of the water, wastewater, gas pipelines, those kind of things. And over the years, I've been selling them. Like I said, it's been almost 10 years now. They're making a big play in this now. So we're seeing a lot more Cradlepoint devices being used in SCADA situations here. So we had somebody that was deploying some older devices. Now they're looking at 5G devices as some of their endpoints. In this case, they were using T-Mobile. But some of these, especially in some of the SCADA situations you see in some of these, or any gas pipeline or utilities, you may not need a 5G on this one, just because the data that's being transmitted is so low. But I mean, in some cases, you do need something that's going to be a fast speed. These guys were seeing over 500 meg, just from these devices over T-Mobile's network. So again, some cases that you see with SCADA and any of the utilities, maybe they don't need something that's going to be a 5G. Maybe they want to be something that's future proof. Maybe an LTE will work on it. But definitely, if you're looking for something that's going to be in a hardened area and you haven't thought about Cradlepoint to begin with, because they didn't have something over the years, they definitely got some great products. So that 1900 5G, even the LTE, you've got your 900s. But definitely, hardened device, ruggedized device, your class 1 Div 2, where you're not going to have any sparks. You don't have to worry about every time this thing cuts on, you got to cover your head and wait for an explosion. You don't have to do that with those devices. So again, another great case study just to see what, some SCADA and utilities are doing around the country.
Yeah, and one of the things to think about, when we're talking about the SCADA systems and the energy market in general, is they tend to be slower in upgrading their networks. So they tend to run basically their network equipment until into the ground or until a technology actually becomes obsoleted. So even though you might not need a 5G device right now for one of these types of deployments, it definitely future proofs that for a company that is a little bit tighter on their budget. While it's a little bit more costly upfront to purchase a 5G device you might not be using, you're going to be able to still use that, 5-10 years down the road. Because as the technologies, improve and increase, your product is still upgradable to support the latest and greatest of those technologies. So definitely one thing to think about when you're talking about these systems. LTE might suffice for what they need, but if they don't want to touch it for a while, it might be worth it to put something 5G in just to have that remote upgradability.
Yeah, and if you want to, if you're upgrading a bunch of equipment, you want to keep everything on the same platform. We'll use oil pipelines, for example. You're obviously not going to have 5G everywhere oil pipeline is going to be, but the Cradlepoint devices that are 5G will fall back to that 4G network. So if in the middle of Texas somewhere they decide to put a 5G tower up, your carrier does, you'll have that ability to use it. But definitely know you still have the strong backbone of LTE with your carriers, even if it's just a 5G device.
Yeah.
And then Cradlepoint solutions that are 5G. I mean, there's, Cradlepoint was one of the first ones to jump out there with 5G. Their partnership with Ericsson over the last year or so. How long has it been, Dave? Has it been 2 years yet? I don't think so. So the partnership with Ericsson just launched these guys into being the 5G leader that's out there. Us, for example, being a partner with Cradlepoint, we are an elite partner, which is the highest that it goes. So not only do we have our staffs trained, and we're one of the highest trained Cradlepoint staffs that we have, whether sales or technical. Our new engineer actually came from many years as an engineer at Cradlepoint. When I covered just the Northeast for a while, he was my go-to SC up there. When I found out he was coming aboard, made me very happy. But brought him aboard. He's been here for a couple of months. I've already been on a couple of calls with him. It was just like, kind of the whole bike thing. You don't forget about riding a bike, and he and I hit it off quick. So again, we can help you find the right Cradlepoint device. Going back to this whole thing, is LTE still right for you? Do you need to invest in a 5G device, or do we need to look at doing 5G? And that's a way that, us being the level of partner that we are with Cradlepoint, we can help you with that on our sales team.
Yeah, and the 5G specialization, which enables you guys to do our outdoor
Yeah, we are one of
high-band
very
and
few of your
devices.
partners that are certified to be a 5G installer. So we are doing a lot of that around the country. 1900, I'll cover this one. This is our 5G or Cradlepoint's 5G ruggedized device. Again, has that 4G fallback, but it's going to look for a 5G network to begin with. It is ruggedized. It doesn't meet that class 1 Div 2 that I was saying earlier about the sparks. Also, you don't want to submerge it in water, but if water were to drip on it, or you get in an area that's a high dust or dirt area, it's built to keep all that out of the actual piece of hardware. You do have four Ethernet ports on it. And then it's dual band, dual concurrent, it supports Wi-Fi 6, and you have the ability to run multiple carriers at the same time. So if you want to do some load balancing with the same carrier, you can actually have segregated on 2 different modems. You have one embedded modem inside the 1900, then you add a secondary modem, an MC400 5G modem on it too. But you could, you could segregate some of that traffic, or if you wanted to say, hey, if you're a disaster recovery type company, or you have a disaster recovery vehicle with your public safety, and you want to make sure that you're always covered, you could have, a Verizon in SIM slot 1, you can have a T-Mobile or a FirstNet SIM slot 2, something like that, and be able to always be covered.
Yeah, and it's one of the products that's in your P&K kits too. But yeah, so yeah, for the Ethernet, the Wi-Fi 6, the 5G, which falls back to Cat 20 LTE. It's got Bluetooth embedded in it, so if you happen to have something that might need Bluetooth beaconing or Bluetooth client access, you have that capability as well. And he had mentioned the dual modem. Dual modem is great with the additional dock for it, which actually adds additional Ethernet ports as well with that dual modem. So you have different options for this one for sure. We actually have 2 flavors of the dock for this one, and I kind of wish we had a picture of it, but we have a PoE dock that goes onto it. It still maintains a single modem, but it'll provide you additional 4 PoE Ethernet ports to give you up to, I think it's 90 watts of PoE power to be able to power, cameras or something that you might have at your locations. It can be a power source for those in this same ruggedized device.
So, yeah, I had some access points that they need. They had nowhere to plug them into, and we're able to put these in a drop ceiling and put them about 200 yards away, and it worked great. Yeah, and then the E3000. This is kind of their top of the line device. I mean, this is going to be, in my opinion, I think you can replace a lot of. We see people out there using Fortinet or some other router, and then they say, "Well, I'm going to get a Cradlepoint to run my cellular part of it." Now there's devices like the E3000 out there that can be your full-blown router that can run run an entire network on it without having 2 pieces of equipment. And Dal, I'll let you talk about some of this one, some of the features of this one.
Yeah. So this one, similar to the 1900, it's dual modem capable, but instead of the 1900 where it needs a dock, this one actually has a slot on the front to support that secondary modem directly. So you have the embedded 5G modem in it, which again does the failback. You can add a secondary 5G modem through the slot on the front of it. 10 Ethernet ports that are LAN WAN switchable. 4 of those are PoE power sources. They're meant to power anything that you need to power them. One of them's a 2.5 gig Ethernet port, and it's able to support the power that we need for our outdoor units. That's coming up in a future slide. But similar Wi-Fi 6 capabilities. This one you can add an SFP to it. We actually have a Bluetooth dongle that you're able to do Bluetooth on this product as well if you need it. It's meant for it's tailored for enterprise, but it does have a metal casing. You can use it in some other, we'll call it semi-ruggedized situations if you need it. If you need something with a bit more horsepower, more Ethernet ports, that kind of thing. But again, like the 1900s, it's a fantastic product. Any enterprise would be.
I do want to mention too that both the 1900 and the 1900s is really if you're going to use a mobility type device, if you're going to have it in a vehicle, that's the device we'd look at. But that, as well as the E3000, have the ability to add an external antenna on it as well. So if you wanted to mount it outside of a vehicle or something like that, or if you have an E3000 inside of a building and then your server room is in the basement, for example, and you have lead walls in that basement, no windows or anything, or you need to get it to the first floor, they have the ability to run some jumper cables out and get that antenna on the outside too. So both of those do have the ability to either use paddle antennas or have an external antenna mounted for it. And then there's the new E300. There was an E300 device that was an LTE only device, earlier, I guess last year is when it came out. It was a great device, but was LTE only. So maybe for someone who doesn't need all the routing functions that an E3000 will do, now there's a 5G version of the E3000 that's now the E300. Less Ethernet ports, still supports Wi-Fi 6. But as far as routing functionality capabilities, I always consider this one kind of like the little brother of the E3000. But still, I mean, if you want to get into 5G, you want to get into gigabit speeds over 5G networks, this is still a great piece of equipment.
Yeah, this one's really tailored towards a small mid business market, right? It is kind of a little brother to the E3000. Definitely less Ethernet ports. The Wi-Fi that it has uses internal antennas, so there's no possibility of using external antennas on that one for the Wi-Fi. So you would be limited in some capacity by range, depending on where you're placing the device, right? But like the E3000, this one's dual modem capable as well. So we have another slot in the front of it. I'm not sure that I'd necessarily run dual 5G on this one the way I would with the E3000, but you're definitely able to if you want to give it a go. But yeah, same Bluetooth capabilities with that dongle I'd mentioned before. This one's an industrialized plastic, so it's definitely a plastic shell, not something that you would even remotely call semi-ruggedized or anything like that. But it's a workhorse in its own right. I'm actually running one of these at my house to run a whole sensor network that I have that makes pretty graphs and everything. So it's a great product.
And 1850. So this is going to be one of the first 5G devices that came out. There's no Wi-Fi on it. This is really just kind of like a workhorse, as I like to call it. If you need something to be a primary, fixed access wireless, we talk about that, running a primary, or if you need it to be failover or something, you've got, or already in a firewall or some kind of, system that you got now that you can do failover. This would be something you'd put in one of those locations, just to run it when you don't need it to provide Wi-Fi or anything like that, or you don't need Ethernet ports, extra Ethernet ports. This is just going to be a straight gateway to your 5G internet, or fall back to that LTE internet. Also in the plastic form factor, easy to mount. I've done a lot of these where we've got them sitting in upside down, even inside of a lot of retail locations in a drop ceiling. But easy to get to, super lightweight. A lot of people like it, believe it or not, because it is white and it matches the front of their lobby and their showroom. So, but again, not something that you want to have, for routing features, or you need multiple Ethernet ports. This is just really just your gateway to the internet.
Yeah, and I was going to mention about the white being for those ceiling mounted applications in stores and stuff. Definitely why we use it. But yeah, this is an adapter. So the best way to think about this is like your conventional cable modem. It pulls that signal in and then sends it out to whatever device you want to connect to it via Ethernet. Now that device could be, a computer directly if you want it to be. We do have a stateful firewall built into it, so it does block all ingress traffic by default. But it does not provide any advanced security features or routing capabilities. So if you do need something of VPN tunneling or anything like that, you would need to, connect it into another router. E300 and E3000 are great, candidates for these, because this product is great at being able to place where you need or where the signal is available versus your, data center or your network closet or something where it might not have the signal there for that cell antenna. It's an alternative to running those external antennas, because especially with 5G external antennas, you incur a lot more loss and a lot more interference a lot quicker than you do with LTE technologies. So, using an adapter like these will get you to the signal better. And then Ethernet backhaul is a no loss technology. So you just backhaul it back to where you need.
Yeah, we see a lot of these in mall applications where you have them in the front of a store, for example, and you run everything back to a manager's office or a server room in the back, because in that carousel, that main walking area, of a mall, that's where you get your best cellular signal, not in the back of the store. So a lot of people put these out in the front. And I always love to tell this story about the reason this white came about in the earlier iteration with the 850 was there was a certain brand of women's lingerie that complained that they didn't want a black box in their white showroom. So they created a white box, went out there, and now here we are years later. If you go to that same retailer, that the entire lobby is black, and now they have white box out front. So.
Black. Yep. I was gonna say they're now black. So.
Absolutely.
Hey, but now they can put any of our routers on.
I'll let you cover the W2005. I think this is a great piece of equipment. I love this one.
Yeah, so like the 1850, W2005 is an adapter also, but this one is a completely redesigned case. It's fully hardened and ruggedized. I want to call it IP67, but I'm probably off on that. But it's an outdoor product. It's meant to be mounted outdoors to really get that signal, or get to that signal in its best and optimal place, right? So this can be mounted on a wall, mounted on a roof, mounted on a pole. Various different mounting options that you can have for it. It's actually liquid cooled inside the unit itself, PoE powered. It has antennas, special end connector antennas that mount to the top of it. But basically, this is your 5G adapter for the outside. So if you happen to know where your tower is, and maybe you're in a brick building or some other kind of medium that actually blocks all that 5G signal from getting into your office or into the structure where you need the service, this is a great product to mount it outside, to place it where you need to. Coupled with our NetCloud Manager capabilities, being able to see with the serving tower that you're connected to with it, you're able to better position the product when you do the installation on the roof, right? And this is actually one of the ones that I was mentioning when I talked about the E3000 having the 2.5 gig Ethernet port. It's actually meant specifically to power this product outdoors on that WAN port of that E3000. So you're able to connect it directly to that Ethernet port, and it powers this device right up with 90 watts of power. Again, no Wi-Fi, no consumer Wi-Fi on it. The Wi-Fi that is built into it is meant for installation purposes only, so you can get those signal metrics, make sure you're in the right location, all that good stuff. And yeah, like our other 5G products, this will fall back to 4G if the carrier happens to lose their 4G capabilities or service at the location. If they're upgrading a tower or something and it happens to go down, it'll fail back if there's no other, local tower to it, or as a future proof, that the service is coming, it's just not there quite yet. So definitely a great product. I don't think there's a slide for it, but we do have a larger version. Well, actually it's the exact same version of this, but it has a millimeter wave antenna array in the front of it, the W4005. Otherwise, the exact same product, just an additional millimeter wave antenna.
Just a real world usage. I've got a big project I'm working on with these guys, and there's so much bandwidth that's being pushed through these, because this is going to be a primary, that we have the carrier's towers. We know exactly where they're at. So we're mounting one 2005 on one part of the building facing one tower, and just to offload, so we're not pulling everything off that one tower. We're facing on the other side of the building using the 2005 and directly at a different tower. So that luckily just worked out where the building that we're dealing with, or the buildings that we're dealing with, the placement, we had different towers that are around there, but the amount of usage, it would just bog down that carrier's tower. And the ability to build multiple of these is great.
Yeah. And we've got mixed installations of both this and the previous device, right? So W1850 and the 2005. Some customers, they might have hundreds of sites, and some might work fine with that 1850 inside, whereas others would need the outdoor. And having RCN being a specialized 5G specialized enterprise partner of Cradlepoint, they're able to provide that outdoor installation service.
You stole my last piece I was going to do, so thanks.
Sorry.
And again, I hope everybody walks away with this knowing that there's multiple devices out there that will fit your needs. Are we saying everybody needs 5G? No. Are we saying that if you think in the future that you would like 5G and you just don't have it in your area, I would say go ahead and update now. The price of the equipment between 4G and LTE and 5G has gotten so much smaller and smaller, the difference of the equipment. And especially for what you get. And then there's different, like we've gone through a couple of the options that you have on equipment. I mean, there's just so many different pieces and models that that Cradlepoint offers, that there's going to be something that we can definitely make sure we have the right fit for you. And part of it, RCN, one of our mottos is the right equipment every time. So we want to make sure we get you into the right piece of equipment every single time. There you go.
I don't want to steal any more of your thunder. Sorry.
So just open up to some questions if you guys have some. Again, we didn't want this to be a what rate plan should we be on if I have a school bus, do I need to be on a 2 gig plan, that kind of thing. It was just really, is 4G great for me, or do we need to look at 5G, those kind of things. So if anybody's got any questions, we'll go over that. And you can put them in the chat, and I need to go and pull up chat. Whoops. So let's see. Is there a certain Cradlepoint device better suited for dual SIM deployments? Well, every Cradlepoint device now has the ability to do dual SIM. Dual SIM doesn't mean that you can run 2 SIMs at the same time, though. And David, correct me on some of this too. So, where you could have a SIM slot 1 and a SIM slot 2 in a device, and let's say you have carrier A in one and a carrier B in the other, just because you want to make sure you always have something covered. If you don't have the coverage there. You have to run one at a time, unless you do something like the 1900 with that that docking station where you're able to add a secondary actual modem, not just the embedded modem. And then you have the E3000 and the E300 where you're able to add those secondary modems inside of the devices. Those you can run concurrent, multiple carriers or the same carrier twice and segregate the traffic. But if it's something is a dual SIM device, it doesn't always mean that you can run those concurrently. David, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, dual SIM's meant for carrier failover for various reasons. One of them being loss of service from that carrier. Sometimes you also get into a situation where you actually have a capped data plan of some kind, right? And when you reach that cap, you can have the device set up to fail over to the other SIM. So it prevents you from incurring any overages. But yeah, so 2 SIMs in the same modem can't run concurrently. You can only run 1 SIM at a time. And part of that's due to firmware. If you have alternate carriers, you can't run 2 different carrier firmwares at the same time. But a dual modem product or one of the devices that we have, one of the routing devices that we have, along with one of the adapters, can allow you to run concurrently dual carrier. Or if you need to, E3000 dual modem with an 1850 or 2005, you can technically run 3 carriers, right? So there's lots of different options. But yeah, 2 SIMs on all of our products, with the exception of the IBR 200. It only has 1 SIM slot. But that's our little IoT device. In most of those situations, you're going to know what carrier you have, and that carrier is going to be sufficient.
I think it's a good point too for those who don't know that Cradlepoint is agnostic with the carriers too. So before, again, back when I started selling Cradlepoint devices, you had to be your carrier specific. If you ordered something for Verizon and you decided to switch over to T-Mobile or AT&T, you weren't able to do that. You had to buy a new piece of equipment. And then a couple of years later, they were able to do devices where you could do a radio firmware update and you could change from carrier A to carrier B. Now the devices are smart enough to know once you put an active SIM in there, it's going to boot up to that carrier. And even if you were to pull that active SIM out, put a different active SIM in, it's going to boot back up that radio firmware again to that active SIM in that carrier. So it's not anything you have to do. There's no updates, no firmware or anything like that to do anymore.
Yeah, our modems can support up to 4 to 5 carrier images on each modem.
Cool. It's not like it was 10 years ago. We got another one. If I were to implement 5G as a primary needed failover, would it be best to back that up with an LTE plan or a secondary 5G plan with a different carrier? In my opinion, it would be really it'd be a use case kind of thing. I think, again, some situations LTE is going to get you by. I mean, are you backing up something that's going to be security cameras that, that's detrimental, where you need to be able to access these things, and it's safety, it's children at school or something. But if you're just backing up a POS machine or something, some credit cards, I don't think 5G is something that you need to use to back it up and use a plan there. But again, it's just like we talked about at the very beginning. Are you thinking about updating to 5G in the future? And if you are, I mean, you might as well do it. But it failover, I think, in my opinion, failover is really just kind of like that insurance policy. Maybe it's just for an office setting, you want to run email, you want to be able to look at some CAD systems, some of those things, look at patient records. It's not something that you need to really run your business like you usually would on a failover. So it's a case by case. I would take it on a case by case basis.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, on a case by case basis for sure. Because if you're doing 5G already today, it's possible that if you need to fail over, or if there's some reason that failover occurs, you might prioritize the applications that you have, right? So that when that failover occurs, you only need to run certain stuff, which means you might not need the same level of service plan. But case by case is definitely the best way to go about it, because then you can really, RCN's really good at tailoring what you need to run your operations the best for you and your customers. So definitely engage with them and discuss out.
So I'm gonna throw you a softball question here. So let's say I have a company and I'm using it as failover, but I want to make sure that I don't go and just, my business doesn't go crazy with data, for example. So is there any way that through the Cradlepoint devices that I could limit some of the data usage being done, or, just certain websites we can only go to?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to that briefly in my last comment, but yeah, we have the ability to do traffic steering, route prevention and all that stuff within the product. So if you do happen to fail over to either that secondary SIM, that secondary modem, or just have us as failover when you're connected, it can be set up to basically grant access only to what needs to be accessed if you do want to limit that data throughput. So turning off things like Facebook, YouTube, Netflix, that kind of stuff, definitely capable, definitely.
And I will say the only, and this is really a true story, the only issue I've seen with failover is that I had a complaint that when they failed over from their primary ISP, that everything was running a lot better, a lot faster on the carriers, and that when it failed back, the people started, nobody said, hey, it's great, everything's working better, but the whole office complained because the internet went down is what they were saying, but it was actually just went back to their primary ISP. Again, telling you how fast that the carriers are getting out there with their capacity and their latency and everything. It's just it's amazing what we're doing over wireless now. I'm here to answer any of their questions. David is really a support for RCN and for us to be able to reach out to him. So anything that's super technical, if again, we have an engineer that's on staff that just joined us a few months ago that came from Cradlepoint. We use him as a technical resource, but for some reason, if he's not available, we have David to go into. So any questions that you have, Cradlepoint related, or even just networking related, or cellular related, reach out to me. Definitely, if I can't answer the question, I've got the resources that can. And David, I appreciate your time, man. Thank you. Great doing something like this with you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it has been, Jackie, and thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks, everyone.
I enjoyed the conversation.
Look forward to doing this next time.